You can check us out wherever you get podcasts, iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, you name it, we're there, including this guy's podcast who's beside me, one Zack Gugenheim from the Big Ten Football Talk podcast. Zack, welcome in. Great to have you with us tonight.
Yo, I'm so pumped to be with you guys. Thanks for having me on the show.
Oh, we're great to have you. And here's what we're gonna do, guys. We're gonna talk Big Ten. Uh, Obviously, we're going to talk about the new quarterback that decided to leave Alabama, Tuscaloosa, to come to Columbus, Ohio. And by the way, Aaron and I did a short video yesterday. I got to talk about this. The Alabama guys and the Georgia guys who are crying right now that these guys are choosing Ohio State is absolutely making my day. The I got to be careful here because we're at 1,000 subscribers, so people are watching us now. Um, so I got to be very careful here now. There is someone who is well known in putting in crystal balls for Georgia. How's that? Was that good enough information? Okay. He said, "What does Columbus, Ohio have that Athens, Georgia doesn't?" And he was so jealous. I was like, "Dude, try like $2 million per player like that. That might do it for you. I don't know, you know." And we have more snow than you guys does right now as well, and colder temperatures. So we have all of that going for us. And we also have two five-star quarterbacks now. Let's dive into that. JR, I'm going to turn it over to you first because you got some juicy news as well before we start throwing questions over there at Zach about the Big Ten. But JR, tell us a little bit about what happened today and the news and rumors floating around old C-Bus about players wanting to take that trip from Tuscaloosa up to Columbus.
Well, yeah, now that I have my nickname, I feel like I need like some kind of like bumper or something like that, like do in the know or something. I don't know. But yeah, so when we got off on Friday, I obviously got home and everything because I don't podcast from home because my internet's not as good there. But I got home and I have a few people that I'm connected with, and I just messaged them and said, "Man, I bet it is just electric in Columbus right now and the Woody and everything." And they just simply said, "You would not believe what all is going on." And I was like, "Spill, let me know what's happening." And so they said they couldn't tell me everything, but apparently, after Caleb Downs committed on Friday night, Keon Keeley, who is at Alabama, freshman, 5-star, Ohio State really, really wanted him bad, but he chose Alabama. I believe I believe same class as Julian Sayin and Caleb Downs. I apologize. Same class as Caleb Downs. Apparently, after that happened, a representative of Keon Keeley, I'm not allowed to know who because all this stuff can get complicated with tampering and everything like that, but apparently a representative from Keon Keeley reached out to Ohio State and simply asked if he were to enter the portal, would Ohio State be interested? I'm not told what Ohio State's answer was specifically, but I was told it was around something to the saying of yes. And that was all I was told. So I'm not saying Keon Keeley's going to enter the transfer portal. I'm not saying he's a lock for Ohio State. Far from that. Keon Keeley could be doing this with the likes of Notre Dame as well. But I am saying that there is interest there, and there is a possibility of that happening at some point. I don't have a timetable or anything like that. Got pretty limited information, but I wanted to really relay that to everybody here.
So if he jumps in the portal, you're saying there's a very, very good chance it's to come to Columbus.
I think there's a good chance. Yeah. Like I said, I don't know if the other suitors for this would be like Georgia, Notre Dame. I think Michigan in the past might have been, but they kind of have a little bit of a, black eye right now with the cheating stuff and everything going on. So people aren't really sure about them. If you notice, not very many transfers are going there, kind of for a reason. But, but anyway, so I'm not saying that his only choice is Ohio State, but I am saying that if he were to enter the portal, Ohio State would definitely be up there. I think it would probably be, if he entered, I think it would probably be between us and Notre Dame. That's just my speculation.
Okay, fair enough. Chris, go to you next, man. What's going on with this quarterback situation where we have not one, but now two 5 stars coming to Ohio State. Julian saying after basically being in Tuscaloosa for a couple weeks, practicing with the team in preparation for the bowl, his head coach leaves. He jumps in the portal and he decides he's not afraid of competition. He's going to head to Columbus. Two 5 stars now, five quarterbacks in that quarterback room. What's going on, man?
Well, first of all, I was very concerned about this at first, thinking, "Uh-oh, he's jumping in. Aaron Nolan's going to jump out." But I've heard from some sources that Aaron Nolan has said he's on board. He's a Buckeye. He's going to be here, so he's clearly not afraid of competition. I don't think Sayan's afraid of competition. I think this is a great thing when we have two guys of this caliber um, who are ready to come out and ball at Ohio State. And let's face it, I think the favorite coming in is still Will Howard, obviously, to start this season, given his experience. But you know what? We've now got two 5 star guys who can push them. What this does is it kind of creates at least an odd man out, if not two odd man out situation for, um, excuse me, Devin Brown and Lincoln Keenholz. Um, I cannot imagine that either of these guys, if we keep the other three, I cannot imagine that at least one, if not both of these guys, are not in the portal post spring game.
Okay, good deal. Jake or Zach, sorry. Gosh, I'm under the weather tonight, guys. Please forgive me. Jake Detweiler asks, love all the or says all the love all the meat chicken fans crying on social media. With everything that's going on, Zach, with Ohio State right now in the portal, what is the rest of the Big Ten talking about with this? What are their thoughts?
Well, I think the immediate thought is, oh, they're just buying their team, which in some ways, yes, Ohio State finally got their NIL stuff together. But I think the reasonable fans, and there's a lot of smart Big Ten fans out there, they understand that Ryan Day is sick and tired of losing to Michigan. He's sick and tired of playing second fiddle. And so they see what he's doing. And I think Mark Pantoni probably put it out there in a GIF. He's pushing all his chips in, and he's saying, "This is what we're doing. We're just going up all in." And I think it has very clearly elevated Ohio State from one of the top 4 or 5 teams for next year to, I think, easily the favorite and probably a couple shades above Oregon. I think people see Ohio State, Oregon as kind of the top 2 of the conference. I've got a good friend of mine, Chris Ebersol, who might be listening right now. He's a Penn State guy, good friend, and he immediately texted me after Caleb Downs, and he's like, Ohio State, Georgia, Oregon, like are the national championship contenders next year. Like they're the favorites, and I would agree. I think the rest of the Big Ten sees what Ohio State's doing, and they're like, oh boy, they've gotten real serious.
So,
Uh, Go ahead, Chris. Go for
Zach,
it.
Zach, do you think this has anything to do with kind of the fact that Ryan Day's been on the hot seat as well? Do you think this is Ryan Day's saying, okay, you know what? I see what's going on. I know that this is a must win season at this point. I've got to go out and do something drastic to get it done.
Absolutely, and I think it's compounded by the reality that Michigan is no longer like the speed bump. They are what you want to be, aside from cheating, right? They are the national champions. They are the one, like, it's no longer Bama or Georgia. Now, granted, Georgia and Bama will always kind of be the standard that in our minds, but now Michigan is there. And so it's not just that we have to get over the hump against Michigan, it's we've got to get over the hump because they've got what we want, which I think adds another layer to this. Because remember, back when Ryan Day took over, like Michigan was a top 25 program. They were good, but they hadn't won the Big Ten in 17 years from
Yeah.
2021. Now all of a sudden they've won the Big Ten 3 years in a row and they're the national champions. It just completely adds fuel to the fire for them because that's where they want to be.
You mentioned the situation in Ann Arbor. Do you think there's still going to be any significant penalties dispensed by the NCAA? And do you think one of those penalties might involve vacating that national title?
So the NCAA president, I believe, came out at some point and said they that they won the title fair and square. I think I remember seeing that.
That being
Um,
said, they didn't get there fair and square, so is it really a
yeah,
legitimate title?
yeah. So I've tried to steer clear of anything other than what's been specified, and
Right.
so in my mind, I don't know what to expect in terms of penalties. I think it could be as bad as a bowl ban and recruiting, uh, like loss of scholarships. I don't think they'll vacate the title, and I'll be honest. I know there's a lot of people, a lot of Ohio State fans that would like that. I think vacating the title is stupid because we saw it happen. It's like USC in 2004.
Right.
Like, but I think it really depends on how hard the NCAA goes. Right now they're focusing on Florida State and Florida for some of the NIL violations. I just don't know. I feel like it's this whole situation with Michigan is unprecedented, and there's no like former punishment to go off of. And so I could see it being massive. I could see the NCAA turtling and not doing anything. I would think they will do something, but it's just unprecedented territory.
Zach, I'm curious to switch gears for a second. I know everybody likes to talk about Michigan's downfall, and I'm sure we'll get back to that at some point. But one team that I've actually not even talked about much on the Big Ten huddle has been Penn State. Obviously, Julian Fleming has gone there, and I don't know if anybody else saw, but he like did a commercial for a car. A car salesman there, and that was kind of fun. Actually, that was a really fun commercial. I wish Ohio State would have some of their guys do that.
Mm.
But Julian Fleming coming in, AJ Harris from Georgia is coming in. I saw somebody today say that Ohio State only has a 2-game schedule next year, which is Oregon and Michigan. They actually left Penn State out completely. What are your kind of vibes on Penn State? Are they going to be considered a top 10 team again next year? Do you think they're going to get kind of left behind with the addition of USC and Oregon? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think it really depends on the development of Drew Aller with their new offensive coordinator, Andy Kotelnicki. I think if Kotelnicki was a great hire for them. And I think if he gets Aller to be who we thought he could be, I do think they can be a player in the Big Ten race. People forget that before this season, a lot of people thought that Singleton and Allen might have been the best running back duo in the country. And I think they had a bit of a sophomore slump. I think Singleton maybe gained a little too much weight, and so a lot of his shiftiness uh, kind of went away. He was still dynamic at times, but I wonder if they get back to the basics. Kotelnicki really works with that offense, that offensive line. I know they lose Fashanu. That's a big loss for them. But that offensive coordinator hire is really good. And Tom Allen is coming in for Manny Diaz. I think it's a great hire. Losing Manny Diaz is not ideal for sure.
Right.
But Tom Allen, I think JR, you and I were talking about this on one of the episodes of the Big Ten Huddle. Tom Allen has always been a better coordinator than a head coach.
Mm-hmm.
And so people who hear Tom Allen, they think, oh, Tom Allen, whatever. He just got fired. This is, I think, a sweet spot for him. They got AJ Harris, the corner out of Georgia, to replace their one of their stud corners. They lose some on defense, but Ohio State has to go to Happy Valley, and that is a hard place to play. And regardless of the talent gap at times, Penn State always plays Ohio State tough. And so I would not say it's a 2-game schedule. I would say it's at least a 3-game schedule. And I think there's a couple other. I hate using the words trap games, but Nebraska is like I think could be sneaky good next year, and they get them at home. I think Iowa is always a hard game to predict because of the defense, because of Ferentz, and who knows what's going to happen with the offensive coordinator. But again, they just got Caden Proctor. So I would I say it's a I think there's two marquee games in Oregon and Michigan, but I think Penn State could easily be a top 15, top 10 matchup, especially with Kotelnicki coordinating that offense.
Put your Big Ten questions for Zach in the comments section. We'll see if we can get to a few of them here. Zach, do you agree? This is a two-part question. Number one, do you agree Ohio State, Oregon, that Team Up North and Penn State are the four best rosters heading into 2024?
You said Ohio State, Team Up North, Penn State, Michigan.
No, I said
Oregon.
Oregon, Ohio
All
State,
right, Oregon.
Team Up North, and Penn State.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I
Okay,
think
if they're
Washington. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
if they're the top four, who's number five in your opinion?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Thank you, thank you.
That's a very good question. It's hard to. It's honestly, I think it's hard to tell because I think USC would be like the knee jerk. They lose a lot. Like if you look at their roster and they're too deep, like a lot of their offense is gone, a lot of their defense is gone, and then a lot of their guys went in the transfer portal. If you look at Washington, they might literally lose their whole offense. I think their entire starting 11 might be either in the NFL draft or in the transfer portal after Kalen DeBoer left. And they lose, I think, their three best players on defense. And so I I would probably still default to USC. The Branch brothers are dynamic. Miller Moss showed a lot in the bowl game. They've gotten some good transfers. They've recruited well. I think the problem, I was probably a little too harsh with USC before the bowl game. I said they're not going to make a bowl game. They're probably going to make a bowl game. They're probably going to win at least 8 games. But that schedule is very, very difficult. And so they might be the fifth best roster, but they play LSU and Notre Dame out of conference. And then if you look at the rest of the Big Ten schedule, they go to Michigan, they go to Washington, they go across the country to Maryland, and then they host Nebraska and Penn State and Wisconsin. And I think all three of those teams, well, Michigan, I think, is a better roster. And then if you look at Nebraska and Wisconsin, I think they are going to be much improved teams.
Okay.
Zach, somebody that went away from USC, as we were talking about them a little bit, and Ohio State fans kind of wanted, I know I personally was interested in having him, was Tackett Curtis, who went to Wisconsin. What are kind of some of your expectations for Wisconsin next year? I thought maybe they might be up there for you as well as maybe possibly that fifth spot. I know that I am a little bit higher on them because of Luke Fickell and Phil Longo. And that whole situation up there. But I've not looked as deeply into the talent that they have amassed this offseason.
Yeah, I thought about Wisconsin. I think the hard thing with Wisconsin is I just feel like there's a lot of unknowns. And so I think Will Pauling coming back at receiver, like he really caught on, and you saw him in the bowl game, right? I don't think anyone expected that Wisconsin would keep it within 2 touchdowns of LSU, and they should have won that game. And so I think Wisconsin does have a lot of talent. I think my big question mark is I think Tyler Van Dyke has a lot of potential coming in at quarterback. He's a transfer from Miami. But does he kind of have a slow start similar to Tanner Mordecai? Like I was very high on Tanner Mordecai coming into the season. And I think this is just something, maybe a referendum on transfer quarterbacks in general. And this is why I'm a little concerned about Ohio State with Will Howard is sometimes it takes a while for those transfer quarterbacks to really get comfortable. Like Bo Nix, it took him a while, and Michael Penix. They had good seasons their first years, but it was really year 2 that they really popped. And I'm concerned about that with Tyler Van Dyke, and honestly, a little concerned about that with Will Howard too. I think Van Dyke's talented, but how is he going to fit into that offense? I think Tackett Curtis is a good addition for them on defense. I thought they recruited, they recruited like they're Wisconsin, right? They had good offensive linemen, good tight ends, got a couple of key pieces in the portal. So they're definitely in the mix. And I think Luke Fickell will do well with the expectations a little lower. I think people were really expecting them to win the West this year. And I think it was probably too much pressure for them. I think they're going to thrive in maybe people expecting them to be maybe a mid-tier Big Ten team.
Real fast before we get on to the next one. This will be really fast. Who wins next year, Wisconsin or Alabama? At Wisconsin, Alabama's finally coming up north.
Oh wow!
I know I'm putting you on the spot.
So I would need
That's the jump around versus Sweet Home Alabama game.
Oof.
Boy, you can't get more opposite than those two little ditties.
Yeah,
I love that.
I still there's a couple things that's going to this. One is Kalen DeBoer is a phenomenal coach. I mean, he just wins games that nobody expects him to win. Right? He beat Oregon twice as the underdog. Beat Texas when people thought Texas would beat them. And now he's at Alabama. And so I know they've lost a lot of talent. I would probably at this point still pick Alabama. But again, we're 8 months away. We still have a lot of roster changing to do. I think people forget how well Alabama has recruited. And I know they're losing a lot of guys. They've lost a lot of guys. But I'll probably say Alabama until Wisconsin proves otherwise. Which is probably not a fair assessment, but I just think you look at the overall talent, even with everyone leaving.
I got a fan.
I would agree.
I got a question
Go
from
ahead.
Bobby McCormick that we need to read here for Zach. What will be the biggest upset in the Big Ten next year? Boy, he's really pulling on your schedule knowledge here.
Yeah. So I said this, and I'm actually dropping an episode with Justin Adams about Nebraska tomorrow morning. I've got Nebraska at USC circled. Like, I think Nebraska gets USC. I think it might be a defining game for their season. I I think people look at this year with Nebraska and think that they 5-7. I think there's a lot of people thinking, oh, this is just an extension of Scott Frost. That's not what they think inside that locker room, inside the athletic department. I think they have the staff. I think they got they have Dylan Raiola. I think he starts, and that's from Justin Adams. What he was saying, Dylan Raiola starts, and they have a very manageable schedule early. But I think they have a lot of tough games in the back half of that schedule. But I think they get USC.
That's a good one. That's a good one. Chris Smith he says the Fighting Fickles beat the cousin chasers in Madison.
See, I got a little personal stake in this too because my aunt is a big Bama fan and she's already mad at me because I'm assuming she's mad at me because Ohio State has gotten Julian Sayin and Caleb Downs and Seth McLaughlin, and so I got to be careful what I say about Alabama right now.
This is wild. The chat just all over this. This is one of your guys right here, Zach. Oh, Yankee Wolverine.
Oh, my guy.
Yeah, the fact we're asking who will win, whiskey or Bama, must have Bama fans looking for sharp objects.
That's a good one.
That's
I
my
like
boy.
Yankee too. He talks to me on Twitter.
Nicholas
He's awesome.
Quint. Bama is going to take a dip. All the players leaving and Saban no longer there. So have you guys seen the guy from Alabama who is like whining that this is so unfair and how the transfer portal has ruined college football? I'm like, dude, you've won 7 national championships in like, what was it? 16 years?
2 decades, yeah.
7 national championships, and you're talking about what's unfair. Welcome to being a college football fan, bro. Like,
Right?
dude, come on, man.
So
Oh,
Zach, I got to ask. We've talked about the player movement a little bit, but there's a ton of new coaches in the Big Ten. We've got we don't know who's going to be on Michigan's sideline next year. You got David Braun, coming off in a probable 8-5 finish, at
don't for,
Northwestern.
don't forget this one, Chris. The Bill
The
O'Brien hire
Bob,
for Ohio
yes.
State.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well,
Might
I'm
have
focusing
let
on head
Zach settle
coaches.
this one later.
Yeah, I'm just focusing on head coaches with this question. We got David Braun.
Fair enough.
You've got, he's the permanent replacement for Patty Fitz now. We got Michigan State hiring Jonathan Smith from Oregon State.
And he deserved that job at Northwestern, mind you. He earned that thing.
8-5 and a bowl win. Absolutely.
Coach of the year, easily.
You look at Indiana hiring Kurt Signetti from James Madison, who
that dude's a tool.
11, he may be, but 11-2, and taking James Madison to a bowl game, which they shouldn't have been eligible for. But
Chris, you don't come in the first basketball game and grab the microphone and go like, Purdue sucks, Michigan sucks, Ohio State sucks. Like, have you not watched college football, bro? Like,
well,
Indiana's on, I think, a 28-game losing streak to Ohio State, man.
I get your point. All I'm saying is, let me finish here. Get to the question.
Schools with a lower than 50% win percentage in the Power 5. Sorry, Chris. Go ahead.
And then, of course, we've got Jed Fish in at Washington, with DeBoers going to Alabama.
Can I also
who
put?
Is the...
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but from here on out on this podcast, can we now call Washington? Can we Washington? Can we do that for just, I think it just fits right. If you're gonna come to the Big Ten, you're the Washington Puppies. You're the Washington Hookies. The Huskies. The Washington Huskies.
He's on a roll tonight. Can you guys tell he's on a roll?
My medicine's kicking in. I'm a little bit loopy. I apologize.
So anyhow, Zach, who do you think is going to have the biggest impact in the coaching ranks this year in the Big Ten?
So ironically, I loved what Kurt Signetti said at the basketball game. Because I think because he knows who the big dogs are and he's not shying away from it. Now, I think he's going to get smacked.
He's going to get hammered, no doubt.
It's hard because I think David Braun proved that he is a phenomenal coach. But then you look at the recruiting. You know what their recruiting class was ranked? 107th in the country. The second worst in the Big Ten was UCLA, and that was in the 70s. And UCLA got 11 guys. So I don't know what David Braun's going to do next year because they lose Ben Bryant, who is the guy who really stirred the drink there. I think they still have a senior-laden roster, but again, what he did this year was nothing short of miraculous, but I just don't know how they repeat it again. But then I say that we kept saying that about Fitz, and he up until about 2019, he had this magic about him. And so I don't know if David Braun has that same mojo. I do think Signetti gets bowl eligible this year. Like, just their non-conference is fairly easy. And then you look at their home and away in the Big Ten, Michigan State, Northwestern away. I think they can beat both of those teams. Although Michigan State, I'll talk about Jonathan Smith in a minute. They also have UCLA away. I think they can beat UCLA. They have Maryland, Michigan, Nebraska, Purdue, Washington at home. Like, I think they can win 3 of those 9 games.
Yeah.
I think Michigan State, though, you have the coach, you have the offensive coordinator who's coming over from Oregon State. They get the quarterback, Aiden Killis. They get Joe Rossi out of Minnesota, who I think was an underrated defensive coordinator. I think if you're looking at best construction with a new head coach, like of a program, I think Michigan State is probably the team you're looking out for. I think he's building them the right way. He's got a couple of key guys. I think it's three transfers in particular from Oregon State that they got, including the quarterback. So I like Michigan State. I think probably my one concern is schedule. You know, going
And I
to Illinois, Maryland, Michigan, Oregon, like that's a tough away slate. And Illinois and Maryland aren't definitively better. It's just that it's tough to play in Illinois because of the wind. You know, that stadium's a wind tunnel. And Maryland is, they're just up and down. And then their home slate is, Ohio State and Iowa. Those two are tough. Indiana, Purdue, Rutgers, I think those are winnable games for sure. But I think that would be my pick, would probably be Jonathan Smith.
So I'm glad you mentioned the schedule because that kind of brings me to another question, and that is obviously the Big Ten expanded this year, adding the four West Coast teams. How do you feel this is going to impact the Big Ten season, specifically from the standpoint of the travel back and forth cross country?
Oh, yeah.
And how do you think that's going to impact the teams in the Big Ten?
Well, I think undefeated seasons are going to be a lot harder to come by. Because if you think about it, it's tough for a team to travel, for Ohio State to travel back to back to say Rutgers and then Michigan. Like that would be tough. But it's within the same time zone, or I think is Michigan Central time zone or Eastern?
No, they're
No, I
Eastern.
think they're with us.
So you're still within, and even if it's like Illinois Central, like it's not
It's an
much of
hour
a
different.
time
Yeah.
change. Yeah. Nebraska might be the toughest one, and Iowa, but again, like it's not constant. Whereas imagine you go to USC and then you come back home and then you travel to the East Coast, and then I don't think people realize just how much of a toll that is, especially on kids who are taking college classes. As much as we talk about NIL and money and semi-pro, they still have obligations as students, and so that takes a toll on your body, takes a toll on morale, um, and so I think we're going to see. I think we'll see more upsets. I think we'll see. I think the other thing we'll see is that a lot of the difficulty of schedule will dictate who gets in the Big Ten championship game more than ever before. So, like the past several years, I think if you look historically, if you remove divisions, I was thinking about this the other day. I think Iowa would have made the Big Ten championship game every year that they made it with divisions, without divisions. Like their conference, that might not be true for one of the years, but in general, even the West winner, save for a couple years, had a good enough record to at least show up. Now, the past couple years, Ohio State and Michigan have eclipsed everybody else, so I know that doesn't necessarily work. So I just blew a hole in my own argument. Never mind. But my point is, scheduling will matter a lot more in terms of who gets those top two spots. And I think that even for Ohio State this year, granted their schedule is, I think, easier. But like say, I think next year they have Penn State and Oregon and Michigan. I forget exactly who but I think they have a much tougher schedule next year. And so even though they might have the best roster, you got to go probably no worse than 8-1 in conference to get to that title game. Otherwise, you're going to get squeezed out. And I think that's going to be the reality. Is I think you still might see an Iowa or a Wisconsin sneak in because their schedule might be not as competitive as say an Ohio State or a USC or an Oregon.
Okay.
Guys,
Eric,
keep going.
there was a good comment there from Will Buck about the AFC NFC. I don't know if you see that. If you want to put that up, but
Oh yeah.
um,
Just
Zach,
just
do you want
go.
to just
Go
talk
ahead and
talk.
read it for me, Jr. Because I'm actually working on the wheel of destiny for someone to win a gift card
Oh,
for
okay.
$100
Ah,
tonight.
Yeah, there we go. Am I entered in that?
No.
No.
Oh, darn.
However, guys, I will like to say this. If I'm not mistaken, we can accept super chats. So if you want to help out, pay for that tonight. I tell you what, anybody who puts a super chat in tonight will get 2 entries into the Wheel of
Love
Destiny.
it.
ooh,
Sound good?
Love it.
Okay. All
All right,
right.
let's get to Will Buck's point here. He says, eventually I can see this being set up with 3 or 4 divisions with playoffs similar to AFC versus NFC. This is a thought that
yep,
I've had as well, Zach, with a possibility of a Power 2 and kind of like the Big Ten on one side, the SEC on the other side, and kind of like merging into the middle, or just the Big Ten has their own playoff, the SEC has their own playoff, and then, winners make it to the national championship game or something like that.
yeah.
I could see something like that happening. Are you of the same mindset, or are you kind of like, no, Jr., you're crazy?
No, no, no. I don't think you're crazy. I think as soon as the dominoes fell for USC and UCLA to come to the Big Ten, that's I think naturally where it has to head at some point. The two obstacles are, I think, the other Power Four conferences now. Like, I think the Big 12 and the ACC are holding on to hope that they'll survive. I don't think they will. And I think the NCAA they actually have to take ownership and lead and basically say, okay, conferences, you really are under our jurisdiction now. Which, knowing the NCAA, will be here in 50 years, ready to go to our graves before we actually get there. But I think naturally that's where it has to go. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to be chaos, and we'll get similar situations to an undefeated power team getting left out, which is like just so absurd.